Hello, everyone. This is Dwight Woods, the Jeet Kune Do Rebel, and welcome to the Jeet Kune Do Dialogues episode number 176. As you're logging in, if you guys would be kind enough to say where you're logging in from, hit the like button, and feel free to continue doing so throughout the dialogue. If you're catching the simulcast over on the YouTube, please be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell as well. If you enjoy my work and you'd like to support the program, please visit JKD Rebel. Click on the Rebel Gear link where you will find stuff like this. This is our Kali JKD t-shirt, which is actually quite apropos for today's dialogue partner, who is Mark Mikita. Now, Mark and I definitely have quite a similar background, but I am pretty sure that we've never actually met in person, and I'm not sure why that is. Anyhow, I've been looking forward to having him come on the program. And really interesting. The titles on his YouTube videos really intriguing. So I'm really looking forward to getting a look inside his mind. And so you guys help me welcome Mark Mikita to the Jeet Kune Do Dialogues. Well, the fingers are crossed. That place that you're in.
This is my house. This is the school in my house.
Okay, so somebody said that the school with the wall is no longer.
Well, if there was a silver lining to the pandemic, it was that the pandemic and the end of my lease happened at the same time.
Okay.
So I had fully intended, because that was like I think the third lease I'd had there. And I had fully intended to sign another lease, but all of a sudden I had a big old space that we couldn't use.
Right.
And we hung out for a while. My landlord was super cool, and we went through the 15 days as everybody went through, and that led nowhere, obviously. We started training in the parking lot, which was ridiculous, and here I am paying thousands of dollars for this beautiful space, and I finally said to the landlord, since there was no end in sight, I said, yeah, seems like time to go. So
right.
And that's okay. I even said it on my website that I had a commercial space. And I'll probably do it again. But I had a commercial space for decades, and I was kind of longing for the backyard feel, because we can go out in the backyard here and train as well.
Okay.
I come from that kind of old school, wanting to touch hands with the students directly, which I have always done as a teacher anyway. So training here in my house makes it easy. I think that I have to say the students have been, there's been a distinct sea change amongst the students. I'm inviting them into my home. There's a much clearer sense of a family and a tribe, if you will. And it's been really positive. So as much as I like the larger space to do lots of things when it's cold and crappy outside, I actually like the tight knitness that this has created. So yeah. I'm not lamenting the loss of the school.
Okay. Listen, Mark. First of all, thank you for doing this.
Sure.
There are so many things that I want to ask you that I have to keep it under control.
Okay.
Right? Because like I noticed already, you use the word teacher and not instructor.
Yeah.
So finish the sentences for me. Word instructor connotes. Finish the sentence.
A word instructor connotes somebody who's read the information and is just parroting it back to you, and they want you to parrot it back to them, to me. Some people will say, oh, you're the chief instructor, and I may say I'm your instructor. It'll come off as an alternative word to teacher. But I think teacher it sets the bar higher from my perspective, that I don't assume any authority as a teacher. I actually take on a responsibility. And I'm really guided by the student's needs, as opposed to turning it around and saying, well, I'm the instructor and I'm on my high horse or my platform, and you should come and bow down to me. I turn it around, and all respect goes to the student as opposed to the other way around.
I suspect that you at some point in your career you delved into what we call professional martial art, and then you
Define that for me, so I can say.
So professional martial art is where you take on the business mind. So
it's interesting because I opened my school in 1978, and like I'm sure you probably have the same feeling. The reason I opened a martial arts school is because I wanted to do martial arts all the time. so martial arts school provides you, now you have to do it all the time because you have to pay for the place. Although back then, I think, as horrible as it sounds, rent was probably $200 a month. I mean, it was so inexpensive. But for me, it was just about wanting to practice all the time and be able to explore this art and continue studying with lots of teachers and so forth. So certainly from the beginning, I didn't approach it as a business. And I remember when I was teaching Joe Hyams, he said I was the only instructor he had ever studied with, which includes Masayama, Bruce Lee, Bong Soo-han, all these very famous people. He said I was the only instructor he'd ever studied with who was able to keep a school open.
Right.
And I said to him, I think that the reason for that is because I didn't ever look at it as a business. I never approached it from well, I've got to put capital down and all those business words. I never thought in those terms at all. All I said was, this is my passion, share it with me.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the foundation of everything. And people would be able to tell right away when they came in, whether it was the way that particular space looked, because everything's always been a kind of a museum for me, because I try to have tangible artifacts that the students can put in their hands and feel the history and the energy from. But I think more importantly is I presume that you're the same, because here we are having this conversation. But my passion for it, the boyish wonder of martial arts has never faded.
Yeah.
So I still find I don't find the trappings very interesting anymore. I don't care what rank you are. None of that matters to me. Show me your light. Show me what makes it mean something to you. That's where the art lives. Touching hands with the old guys and feeling that real energy from somebody who's done it for real in the jungle somewhere, and it just changes your outlook. Also, having had, we both trained with Innocanto. I've trained with lots of people. I've fenced for years and years and years, and when you study with guys who are like my fencing teacher was a grandmaster in fencing and unbelievably capable and just a lexicon of information about the sword, and just being in the presence of that, again, I felt like I was a kid, and I look forward to every class. I look forward to the questions that students ask. I've never come at it I don't ever teach from a class plan, for example. The class plan is created by the presence of the people who are there seeking. I already know how much they know, and the makeup of the class will actually guide the instruction of that class. So that's the way I've always taught.
That fencing teacher was also your college student?
Yes. It was very interesting because when I first went to look for a fencing teacher, and I looked, I think it's because of my Philippine martial arts background, I looked for an old guy. I didn't really care I didn't care what you want. Champion this, champion that doesn't matter to me. In fact, I've always said when people say, "Oh, I study with this guy, he's a world champion," I always say, "Well, I'd rather study with the guy who made him a world champion." So for me, it was really about, I wanted somebody who had so much experience that the art was no longer something he was consciously memorized and repeating. It was just something from his bones, from his DNA.
Right.
And so I found this wonderful guy, and I took a first lesson with him, and I had almost 30 years of martial arts at that point. And he looks at me sideways like he thought it was a ringer, because I kept picking up everything really, really quickly. He's like, "You've never done this before?" I said, "No, never." So finally he said, "I'd really like to teach you. You have a really good capacity to learn this art." And I said, "Well, I'd love to trade with you. I teach a different form of fencing, and I think you'd probably be interested." And he was really open-minded, so he showed up at my school the next night, and grabbed a stick. He was like 73 at the time,
Wow.
and grabbed a stick and came out and started working with us. And I started showing him how the systems were very, very similar, disengages and so forth. And he was thrilled. So he started doing Philippine martial arts with him or with me, and I started fencing with him. It was great.
Wow. And it was decades, right?
Decades, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. That's excellent.
Until he passed away. Yeah.
So let's backtrack a little bit. You said you opened up in 78.
Yeah.
When you opened up, is this what you're teaching?
Oh, it's boy, my path has been like this. I started in Filipino martial arts, certainly before that. I was doing Filipino martial arts then.
Okay.
But I had studied a lot of other martial arts. My dad was in the military, so we traveled like crazy. So anytime we moved, okay, well, the art that I was studying, I couldn't find that anymore, so I'd have to switch to a new art. So I was sort of forced variety. And so I never have been the one who would say, oh, this is my system or my style, but your experiences create the art for you. So having had that varied background and also traveling the world, as it were, it gives you a different way of looking at things.
Right.
It's always interesting to hear somebody who's like never gone like 100 miles past where they live. Very different way of looking at life. So I think at that time I was certainly doing a lot of kicking. I started in kicking arts.
Can you see the picture that I put up?
Oh, the me breaking bricks in high school.
Yeah. So when was that? What was going through your mind?
That's the middle of high school, probably 1977, early 1978. Yeah, I'm 17. Okay. Yeah.
All right.
So crazy days. That's probably around 1984, maybe 84. That's my brother.
Okay.
That's about the same time, maybe within 6 months of the previous picture.
Right. So my question is, when you started, was it traditional stuff, classical stuff? Was it JKD Kali?
Oh, certainly. Certainly, Filipino martial arts was influencing it. That was also. It was also. I opened my school kind of right at the end of the Kung Fu craze. And anybody as yourself who lived through that understands how entirely different that was. It was an entirely different time, and the energy in the air was different. The interest in the martial arts was really, really strong. So, I opened my school and I had a full complement of students within a week or two. So it just took no time at all because there was a tremendous interest in martial arts at the time. So it was a mix. I was certainly very, very strongly influenced by Bruce Lee and Krishnamurti and all these philosophers of the time, Alan Watts and so forth. I was also, as it says on my website, I was very influenced by my father, who was very self-taught and was very adamant that you should essentially forge your own path. He was never one to be a follower. So it would be interesting. I think you probably saw just recently. My wife bought a digital converter to convert old videos. So I started doing that. We've been really busy for the last week or two, so I have a whole bunch more videos to do. But I have some from around the time when I was like 18 or so when I opened my school. So it'll be interesting for me because I haven't seen those videos since then.
Okay. All right. So wait, I'm confused. You trained in what could we call it? Graphic art?
Oh, well, I have an inborn artistic talent. My brothers and I, all three of us had artistic talent. And then I went to illustration school. Yeah.
Right. Okay. But at 18, you're already teaching martial arts. So at what point did you consider being an illustration artist?
Well, it's funny because I had a similar conversation to this yesterday with a student who's very young and he's trying to figure out the path of his life.
Right.
And I said, I already knew when I was 13 or 14 that I wanted to teach martial arts, but the pressure is from parents and from the world, where you have to have a stable career. You know, we all go through that. And so since I had this artistic talent, and my dad said, well, you should, you know, they encouraged me to go to college, and there was nothing in the college realm that was of interest to me. I looked into medicine, because I considered being a surgeon. That would be a whole show by itself. But I decided against that for a bunch of good reasons, and I've never regretted that choice. And then just because I had this artistic talent, and my parents were wanting me to do something, I said, well, I'll just go to the training. I enjoy learning, so I went to study illustration and scientific illustration and design is what it was. And and I knew after 18 months of doing it, and it was longer than that, but about a year and a half into it, because I really, you know, I didn't do it thinking, well, I'm not going to do this and I'm just going to do it because they said so. No, I invested myself in it. But I knew after investing myself in it that just because I have the capacity of the inborn talent doesn't mean it's what I want to do for a living. And it just didn't fire me up.
Do you have that ability now to know immediately whether or not a thing is for you?
I don't know if I could honestly say immediately, but certainly the decades have allowed me to be able to, like the prow of a boat, I can kind of push aside the stuff that might have been kind of sparkly to me when I was younger, and now I kind of go, yeah, that's not interesting. So I've never been one to be influenced by peer pressure. I think that's just growing up, moving so much. I didn't really have long-term friends when I was a kid because we had to move all the time. So I really just had my brothers and my family. So so peer pressure, like when other people were picking up smoking and drinking and all that, I was doing martial arts.
Right.
So
So
I've never done any of those things. So
okay, I'm gonna ask you the most difficult question you've ever been asked. Okay. The greatest conversation you had with that guy.
Greatest conversation I had with my father. You know, there's so many good ones. I think the first one that pops to my head, I'm just going to go with that.
Right.
Because it's a nutshell. It's a small conversation, but it has you can imagine once you hear it how big of an influence it had. I was young. I can always think of how old I was based on where I lived because we moved so much. So I was probably about 11 years old. I came home on my bike, and my father, surprisingly, was actually home early, which that was rare. He was usually working on base. And I come home, and I had just encountered a teenager, and I don't remember the circumstances, but I remember the kid had basically sworn at me. He'd hit me with this litany of swear words, and nobody really swore in my house. No, my father was really disciplined about not hitting us with that kind of language. And I came home and I said to my dad, you know, or I actually didn't say anything. I think my father could just pick up on the fact that something is going on. And he said, what's going on? I said, well, this guy, he said a whole bunch of horrible things to me. And he said, well, what did he say? You just tell me. Don't worry about what the words are. Just tell me what they were. And I told him, I don't remember what it was now, but it was, as you can imagine. And my dad, very calmly, he said, well, if he was speaking Swahili, would it have had the same impact? And I said, well, no, I wouldn't have known what he meant. And he said, so who gives power to the words?
Yeah.
And it's, what is it now? 50 years ago? And I still remember it like yesterday because that really, you can reach out in all of your experiences in life and ask yourself, who's actually giving power to something that's upsetting you or making you feel less than? It's really just you. It's your own cognition, the way that you're viewing the world. So that was just one thing. I can think of many, but that's the first one that pops into my head.
What developed that approach and attitude in your dad?
Well, my father was a child of the Depression. His father abandoned the family when he was a kid, when the Depression came. So all of a sudden he's a kid, and his mother turns to him and says, "Well, you're now the man of the house." And within a short time after that, he was a child laborer in the garment industry. So he was selling clothes 16 hours a day as a little kid.
Yeah.
And he did that for years. And so he basically lost his childhood. And in fact, one of the things he said to us, I remember he came home one day and we were my brothers and I were kind of lamenting the fact that he wasn't home very often. And my father said something that kind of stuck in my head. He said, "Well, your mom's job is to raise you and feed you and keep you clothed and make sure everything's square." He said, "I have to go to work. So my job as your father is to make certain that you have a wondrous childhood," which is such a wonderful thing to say. I've said it to any of my students who become parents, because my dad did just that. I mean, I've visited innumerable castles when I was a child, because my dad would always make sure that we went to those kind of things. And it wouldn't just be a tourist thing. He would oftentimes, because he was a logistics guy, he would oftentimes arrange private tours for us. And he would have studied the history, so he'd walk around and tell us the history of the battles that occurred here. And it was really magical. So, and that's just one example, but he did that all the time. He really made it a point to give us the kind of childhood that he never had. So the war comes, he lies about his age. He's 17 years old in that picture. Lies about his age, joins the army to fight the Japanese, actually tries several times and gets turned away, but eventually gets turned in. His birthday is October 18th. He's on a ship in Leyte Gulf on October 18th, and 2 days later he lands on the beach in Leyte with MacArthur. So that was his existence. So he had to essentially teach himself throughout his whole life. He did 5 years in the Army, then he joined the Air Force because his news service provided more career opportunities. Had a 25-year career in the Air Force, and was just really a self-taught person. He ended up getting several Air Force Commendation medals and just being very successful as a military man, and yet had his childhood stolen from him. And it was really just to be around somebody like that and just be inspired by him. As it says in my website, his experiences with the Filipino guerrillas is what steered me to Filipino martial arts in the first place.
Right. Yeah.
So,
Yeah. That's I'm not a sensitive type person, but that's quite touching.
Yeah. It's a long time ago. I mean, he passed away in the 80s, and it's here on my wall. There's several pictures of him on my wall, and when we do citations at the beginning and end of class, it's to those people who have gone before, and there's a little thing over here on the wall. I don't know if you can see it in the shot, but it basically has stones in it, and on all the stones are all the teachers I've had who have passed away.
Right.
And the names are written, and my father's name is in there as well. And so every day we have class, we salute those who have gone before us. So I pay respects to my dad on a constant basis. So.
Okay. Well, okay. So since you brought up your current location,
Mm-hmm.
Can we talk about that location?
I never intended to paint that mural. It's the first time I'd ever done a mural. I'd never put brush to brick wall before, ever. And what I had originally done is, you can see the skeleton over on the left side with angles of attack. I just wanted a reference, so I didn't have to. Every new student, I had to go, okay, let me try and explain it to you. It was an easy reference thing. After that, I think I painted the sword and stick and the Philippines on the door, and then over time, just individual pieces started coming out. And I think that's like 3 years of painting. And I eventually just ran out of space. And, I had actually considered, I was planning on re-signing the lease, and I had actually considered making a sort of Leonardo da Vinci kind of, actually Michelangelo kind of scaffold so I could paint the ceiling. Because I was going to continue on and just paint the ceiling. So it was. I did a little video of me kind of painting over the wall. You probably have seen that.
Yes, I have.
It's funny because it wasn't as emotional to me as it might have been for other people, because I can paint it again. So it's not like it's lost to me. certainly some of the pieces that you see there, like at the bottom left, you can see there's a rendition I did of a picture of two British commandos doing close quarter termination skills, like sentry neutralization with daggers. That took 16 hours. So, I mean, some of those pieces are 10 hours, 12 hours, 16
Right.
hours. It's not like it was an easy thing because the surface is really unforgiving. It's very uneven. So to try to be, and again, coming from technical illustration, there's only one standard, and that's perfect. So it was an exercise in letting go of my ego, because you can't be perfect on a crappy surface. So it was interesting. I would do it again in a different way, but I've always made a point when I move to new locations to never repeat myself. Okay. So I try to do something different. I am, by the way, I've had a lot of people ask me to make prints of the wall. Like, I have lots of photographs of it to make art prints so you can put on your wall. So
that's an idea.
Yeah, I'm in the middle of talking to people from here, Bayani Arts, about them producing those for me and selling them. So I also did, as you can see up in the top left of the painting, it was funny. I was just practicing one day, and I realized that it was 30 years. At that point, it was 30 years since I had been training with Dan. So I decided to put a portrait of Dan up on the wall, just as a symbol of remembrance of that. And it's of him during that time period. So kind of how I always think of him. Right. And then I soon after that, I put Bruce right over him. So there's a kind of a combination of Bruce and Dan together. And I've had a lot of people ask me for just that to put on the wall. So that we may also do just a print of that as well. So.
Okay. And this one.
Oh, that's just a reverse.
The opposite end, right?
That's the other side of the school, yeah.
Okay.
And it's funny because I did the meditation picture there. I was starting to feel a little bit too aggressive in the school, a little bit too militant. So I thought, okay, I need a little bit of a balance. So it just popped into my head, hey, I remember this great picture that we've all seen of Bruce sitting on the beach doing some meditation. So the way I always do, all of these were all freehand. So I just basically stuck the photograph on the wall, and I just sat there and painted it.
Right.
So one of the things I hadn't actually anticipated was that because of the reflective quality of the flooring, it really made it seem like he was really sitting there when you're in the school. You see him reflected in the floor. So, and it is life size. So if you sat next to it, it would just be like you were sitting next to him.
Yeah.
So that was pretty cool.
That you aspect of technical drawing that you just mentioned, the perfection thing. How does that inform you as a practicing martial artist and then as a teacher of martial art?
Well, precision, anybody who you talk to who studied with me, I'm really about details. I'm the guy who teaches the details of the details of the details.
Yeah.
Even when I go back years ago to when Burton and I were practicing together, because we trained in the park together for a couple of years and just beat the crap out of each other over and over again. But everything that we did back then was about dismantling the art, sort of breaking it all down and saying, okay, what is true here? Just because you or someone with a certificate or a famous name tells me something's true, that doesn't mean it's true. I've never been that guy. Like I said, I'm very iconoclastic. So I'm just going to go in and look at it and find out if it's truthful for me or if it's generally true. So picking things apart, detail-wise, that's what you do as an illustrator. I mean, when you do an exploded machine drawing, that's exactly what you're doing. You're taking that machine apart and showing all of the pieces, and the only caveat is that all the pieces have to be correct. It all has to be perfect. It's not a cubist rendition. It's specifically accurate. So for me, when I'm teaching, I'm very much about the nuance, and especially in the Filipino martial arts. And let's just remove the Filipino-ness. When we're fighting with weapons, it's fencing. Fencing is a very old martial art. And all fencing forms, whether it's Western fencing or Kenjutsu or Filipino or Eskrima, they're all sharing the same principles. That's what principles are. They're universal. So I always come at things from principle as opposed to, well, in this system we like this particular expression of a technique. I've never been that guy. I'm all, why does this technique work? What is the foundational principle? And how can I at 6'3" teach that to this young woman who's half my size and half my weight, and show her the principle so that in her body she can feel the reason why it works, rather than just trying to imitate the way I do it, which is not really learning, it's just imitating.
Yeah.
So I'm all about that nuance and detail.
Yeah, actually said something there that I have to thank you for, because it's not really something that I've considered. It's on your website, and it's about trying to see through the student's eyes.
Yeah, that's what
That's brilliant, man. That's
well, if you think about it, even if the idea never came to you before, it's what you do when you teach. It's the only way you can actually impart something to someone. So you have to figure out, okay, what is it that they're seeing? What is it that they're not understanding? So rather than just yelling at them or pushing them harder, you have to get kind of into where they are, into their space, and say, what is it that you're perceiving here? And then show them how they can be corrected. So, so I think every teacher who's worth his salt is actually doing that, whether he has ever phrased it that way or not. I think it's a normal thing to teach that way.
Yeah.
I think the better teachers, if we want to give a higher or lower score to teachers, the better teachers do it naturally.
Right.
We can all remember, for example, if I use your scholastic education when you were a kid, you might have had a dozen English teachers. You probably just remember one or two of them. Those are the ones that reached in and got you. Their voice resonated with you. Whether it was a math teacher, a history teacher, whatever, there's a small number of those teachers that stay with you, and you always remember them, even though you may have had dozens of teachers over the time of your schooling. So I think as a martial arts teacher, that's what I'm not seeking to be remembered by my student. I'm seeking to get all of the craft out of the way and be able to expose the principles of the art to them so they can actually understand it and create the art for themselves.
Right.
So that it becomes their art. I'm not a follower at all. I never want my students to be doing the Mark Mikita style of Filipino martial arts. I want them to be doing their style.
Right. Okay. Here's what I found interesting, because you're the only other person that I ever saw did this. This logo says the Mikita School of Martial Arts, singular.
Singular, yeah.
Why?
Well, because art is art. Sculpture, painting, dance, martial art, it's all art. Art is actually a word that is both singular and plural. It doesn't have to have the S put on it to be plural. So martial art includes not only the physical doing of some technique that would be designed to cause injury or death to an opponent, but it's also relating yourself distance-wise. It's understanding the history, the culture that created this art. It's understanding physics. It's understanding anatomy. It's all of those things. All of those things are martial art. It's really important, and we all, as teachers, we understand this. What we teach, as much as people like to say, oh, they teach the scientific approach, I usually will challenge people and say, well, just do me a favor and explain the scientific method to me so I know if you actually know what you're talking about, because it's easy to grab that word science and say, I'm being scientific. Most people aren't. But if we are genuinely scientific, then we're using applied science. For example, I've been a guest instructor in anatomy programs in colleges teaching anatomy from a martial arts perspective. Because I'm using the applied understanding of anatomy as a martial artist to essentially dismantle the skeleton of my enemies. Okay, so if I understand how his skeleton works, where those tendons are, where those ligaments are, where they're strong, where they're weak, what kind of forces are going to be most effective, that's a really interesting way to look at anatomy, and it can kind of turn the lights on for somebody who's studying what would otherwise be a very dry subject. Anatomy's boring if you don't have a reference for it. There's no reason to learn it. So I think applied sciences is really important. I constantly talk about Newton's 3 laws. I'm constantly using physics in class. I'm always doing that.
Do your students think you're weird?
Look at my house. I mean, I think you probably saw what they gave me for my birthday. They know I'm weird. They gave me this. Of course, I'm weird.
Oh my God!
You know, who ultimately who wants to be normal?
Yeah.
I don't want to be normal. I don't want to be normal at all.
Right. You wouldn't change your life at all, would you?
Well, this is one of those things where I have to say, okay, well, I want to be completely honest, or I want to kind of go with the party line. There are things if I had the opportunity to go back and make slightly different choices, I would do that. I think we all can say that about our life.
Okay.
But I'm married to an amazing woman. I live 5 minutes from the Pacific Ocean, and I'm extremely healthy. And what more is there? I get to study something that I've had a passion for all my life. I get to do it as my living my whole life.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I'm pretty happy. There are people I would like to study with that I would like to get that opportunity. On the flip side, it sort of alludes to this on my website. There have been it's been oftentimes a disappointing path to run into the reality of human failings amongst people that I sought out as teachers. You want them to live up to the hype, as it were, and more often than not, like everywhere else in the world, they don't. And part of that is due to the hype. The hype is I oftentimes say, and obviously having painted Bruce Lee on the walls of my school a couple of times, I obviously have respect for the man.
Right.
But I'll be the first person to tell my students, please don't deify this guy.
Yeah.
He was just like the rest of us. He did some stupid stuff in his life. He made some mistakes. We're still talking about him all these years after his death. So he obviously had a great impact, but don't make him into an infallible human being who could somehow defy the laws of physics, because that makes it impossible for you to really genuinely follow his example, because now you've made him impossibly perfect. Rather, let's look at this guy who had one leg shorter than the other, was blind as a bat, had a lisp, all these other things that were just because he's a human being and had failings.
Right.
And then look at the impact that he's had. And did he have as much access to martial arts as you and I now have? No way.
No way.
We know about martial arts that he'd never heard of when he was alive. So the notion that, well, nobody can ever exceed this 32-year-old man. I have several students in my school who are that age, and I said, okay, well, you're the age that Bruce Lee died. So how much have you accomplished in your life, and how much of a perfect view of life do you have at this point? And then they all feel like, oh, I said, well, so that's the same as he was. Don't make him into a god. He was a 32-year-old kid. And I'm not denigrating him. Obviously, I have a great respect for him, but he was a 32-year-old kid. Okay, yeah. I'm almost twice as old as he was. So
right. Yeah,
you learn a lot in those later 30 years.
Hey,
so,
I'm gonna do a real stupid devil's advocate thing. Okay, get ready. Well, if you're so inspired by Bruce Lee, how come Filipino Kali forms the bulk of what you teach?
It's a great question. I can answer it in a simple. I'll answer it in a simple way first. It's the one thing that I've studied. First of all, it has a present reality in real warfare. I can actually go and talk to people and have met many people who have really done this in real warfare, not in tournaments, not with safety kick pads on their feet, not in sparring, but in real battle. So that's very appealing to me, because my father used to say when I was a kid, he'd say, well, martial means war, war means weapons, weapons mean killing. So only in the West, as I say on my website, do we think about martial arts in an unarmed mentality. That's purely a Western approach to martial arts. So it was that really drew me. And I think the reason it's the core, and I know that you understand this, is I can take any other martial art, something that's seemingly so different, for example, as Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, I can easily infuse it into Filipino martial arts, no problem.
Right.
But I can't do the others. I can't go the other way.
Right.
I can't infuse Filipino Kali into a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu skill. They'd be completely dumbfounded. So I think that is one of the reasons. So
you see what you just said there is one of the reasons why I wish I was not on Facebook so much.
Make that more clear. I'm not sure what you mean.
Because as somebody who runs a page titled "I Love Jeet Kune Do,"
Yeah.
for me to say what you just said about Filipino Kali, right? That's like those are fighting words.
Sure. But Bruce himself said when he saw Filipino martial arts, he said that's JKD. So and it really is. And again, with all respect to Bruce Lee, Bruce didn't actually come up with anything absolutely brand new. He just wanted to get back to the essence, because especially in the Chinese martial arts, so much of it had gone way astray from the essence, from the core of what it was about.
Right.
So seeing that and understanding that, and particularly as you and I can remember the time, it's the 60s. Okay, it's Haight-Ashbury, it's all these philosophers. It was you may remember a word that we were learning in school that we had. It was everybody's long word to learn how to spell. It was anti-disestablishmentarianism. Yes, and what's the word mean? It means to be against people who are against the establishment.
Yes.
It was essentially to be against hippies, to be against these people who are trying to change everything. So that's what that whole generation was about, and Bruce was right in the middle of it. So of course he was being revolutionary because it was a very revolutionary time. So that wasn't new. That was just, it's cyclical. You know? So he was just the right person at the right time.
Mm-hmm.
His confluence of things, his talent, his not completely Chineseness, which kind of fired an I'll actually use the word anger in him.
Yeah.
Because he himself experienced that racism even when he wanted to study Wing Chun, because he wasn't full-blooded Chinese, so that impeded him in that regard. So that will either make you just give up, or more often it will light a fire under you. It obviously lit a fire under Bruce Lee. So I think to me JKD. First of all, I'm as I say on my website, Bruce actually asked us to stop using the name. He actually stopped, so I don't ever really bring up Jeet Kune Do when I'm teaching. I will refer to the teachings of Bruce Lee and then give credit where credit's due to the teachings of Krishnamurti.
Mm-hmm.
But really, to me, it's about being incisive. It's about, well, let's look at this and ask ourselves if this is actually the truth in real combat. So
it's the application of the art and not the bloody talking about it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I recently, I think you may have seen it. I recently put up a video just practicing some disarms on one of my students.
Mm-hmm.
And in the last decade or so, maybe a decade and a half, I've had this sort of personal practice focus. Something that I would hear all the time from everyone. I know you've heard the same thing, is you should be able to disarm every angle. You should be able to counter every disarm attempt, and you should be able to counter disarm every counter. And it was always the should. You should be able to do this. You should be able to do that.
Yeah.
And yet in the classes where that was said, we weren't practicing that.
Right.
And it started to irritate me after a while, because it would always be this magical group of people that we didn't get to meet, and they could do it, and they were able to do this, and I just got a little bit tired of it. So I started saying, okay, I'm gonna start exploring this in an intelligent way. I'm gonna basically take the essence, the nucleus of Jeet Kune Do, and I'm gonna apply it to this exploration, to this research. So I'm gonna start. I basically created this exercise, if you will, that is formless, shapeless, all the words we know we can all rattle off, and be able essentially to do what we would call randori in jiu-jitsu, which is just rolling, but do it with weapons in my hand.
Right.
So I can do it safely, but I'm not following a pattern. I'm not doing a set drill. I'm not saying, okay, I'm going to attack you once and you're attacking me once. No, it's essentially two people trying to best each other.
Yeah.
And then I said, okay, in the middle of doing that, and I came up with a very good way to teach it. I'd love to touch hands with you and show it to you, by the way. I started saying, okay, I'm going to disarm you anytime you touch me, whether I've made the impact or you have made the impact. I'm going to find out if I can disarm every angle, I'm going to essentially start doing what they always said we should be able to do. And then I'm going to counter you from doing so. And it's gotten to the point now where I find it so simple to disarm everybody. And I've had to change the way that I teach disarming, because I think disarming is always taught incorrectly. Everybody teaches it in a defensive format, and that, while it's okay to expose someone to the idea that way, it won't work combatively if you do that. You have to do it counter-offensively. So I've had, not by trying to seek it out, but by going to teach seminars, I've had the opportunity to touch hands with a lot of really high-level guys. And I'm disarming them left and right.
Right.
And kind of see the shock in their face, like, what the hell are you doing? And and I said, well, two things. I'm not doing a system, and you are doing a system, and I know your system, so I know what you're going to do. And you can't pick up on or predict what I'm going to do, because I'm not following a system. I'm just with you. I'm present in this moment. And isn't that Jeet Kune Do?
You're doing what Innocanto did in the old days, where what I realized after a while with him is that what we got on seminar was a result of him analyzing and putting stuff together. And I think that what I got from that is what he was really teaching is that we should do that ourselves.
Oh, of course. Yeah.
You know, when he would say, you should be able to come up with 12 things from this.
Yeah. Yeah, well, and very few people were doing that.
We're supposed to go home and do that.
Yeah.
Right? We're not supposed to write down what he did in the seminar and then teach that as the curriculum.
Which is what everybody does. You know, it's funny that you say the write down thing, because I remember when I was at the Innocanto Academy, and I remember everybody had their notebooks and they would all be writing everything down. And I would never do that. I would never take a single note.
Right.
And I think the initial thought was, well, he's not very serious. Until 6 months from then, and they'd be asking me how to do all the techniques. Because writing it down doesn't put it in your body.
Yeah.
You know, I was always, you know, people learn differently. Some people are tactile, some people are visual. I know for my own experience, like when Burton and I would be partnered in the same class, if Dan would demonstrate something, we would watch. He would give an explanation, do a couple of demonstrations. More often than not, it was someone else demonstrating, and Dan was just kind of giving the overview. Mm-hmm. And as soon as he would say, okay, try this, I would turn to Bert and I'd say, hold on 1 second. And I'd go over to Dan and I'd say, do it to me once. I only needed to feel it. Just show me one time. And and now I got it. That essentially completes the sphere for me. I needed to have the visual, the auditory, and the tactile. I needed all three. Yep. And it's still the way that I learn best. Just let me feel it. Because the nuances are, you're going to feel the nuance in the doing. I can explain it to you. I may be very eloquent in my explanations, but unless you feel it, it's that aspect is always missing. That's why, as much as I'm open to teaching Zoom classes, for example, that one part is missing.
Right.
You can't touch hands, and I think both Jeet Kune Do, as Bruce Lee taught it, which is to me the only Jeet Kune Do, and Filipino martial arts, I think they are both direct transmission arts. If you want to understand it, you have to feel it from a high level teacher and the subtlety. Yeah. If you don't, then you're just repeating. Especially in the Filipino martial arts, it can just become patty cake with sticks. Just a whole bunch of gobbledygook that has no actual application at all. People love to do their spins and their twirls, and it's why the old men laugh.
Right. Yeah. After about a month and a half of Zoom, I couldn't take it.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's not. So you talked about the old guys laughing,
Yeah.
and I'm having a little bit of trouble pulling up the pictures like I promised you that I was going to be able to do. But I do have them here where I can look at them, even if I can't see them. So um, there's pictures of you with Ron Saturno.
Yeah.
So man, I'm going to keep working on it. So while I work on it, you tell us Saturno, Bacon, and Cagnette. Influences on you. While I try to pull up.
Well, Saturno is actually studies with me. He's a student of mine when I go up to San Jose.
Okay.
And obviously comes from Angel Cabales and Serrata Escrima. Very fast, crazy little motherfucker. Pardon the language. I like Ron enormously. You know, he comes from a teaching background, so we can kind of spark off of each other because he's a very intelligent guy. Yeah. I think I frustrated him a lot when he first started working with me because I just disarm him all the time. But he's a great guy. I like him a lot. Bacon goes back to, I mean, he's the heart of Balinchwak. Apart from there was a gentleman, all of a sudden the name slips my mind. It'll pop back into my head as soon as I'm off this call, of course.
Okay.
But he was actually the real thing, and he was killed by the Japanese during World War II. But Bacon was one of those guys who had that. I mean, I think Bruce and Bacon would have gotten along swimmingly, as they say, because he had that essence. He could take you apart, and again, doing different twirls and patterns and all that. That's not it. If you get an opportunity, and I don't normally speak in a egocentric way, but if you want to understand it, come and touch hands with me, and I'll be happy. Right. Happy. It's my obligation as a teacher of this art. I'll be happy to let you feel what I'm talking about. And if that light is inside you, it'll throw gasoline on that light.
Okay. Right.
Yeah, there's Bacon, there's Dishin Funakoshi and Kakoi Kinyeti.
Yeah. So I mean, if we go through all of them, because literally, Mark, I spent about 3 hours on your website.
Wow. That's great. I hope it was interesting.
Okay. Dave Hatch is saying it's Saavedra. Is that the name?
Yes. Doreen Saavedra. Thank you, Cheref. Thank you. Exactly. Right. Saavedra was the man. So Saavedra was the Bruce Lee of Balinchwak.
Okay.
He was the core. Yeah.
Okay. So there's if I remember correctly, Mifune, Funakoshi, and Kano also as influences on you.
Yes, you're talking about Kyuzo Mifune.
Yeah.
Amazing. I'm sure if you've been around for a while, you've seen film of Kyuzo demonstrating with guys who are 3 times bigger than he is. And, yeah, he is amazing. And again, the influence is the absolute dedication. This is, first of all, again, we have, let's be simple about it. We have better nutrition available to us. We have better quality training. Essentially everything that they had available to them is better now. And yet look at the lack of that dedication. So the thing that made him what he wasn't the stuff that was surrounding him. It was in here. Right. It was what that heart was. And every person on that list has the same thing. Yeah. That really what it is what it's about, that core. And again, for me, that's a great picture. We had a great time that day. So that's really what it is the people who have lit that fire under me, as me and Mark Denny. It all comes back down to that, is that core. In fact, since we were talking about the Innocanto Academy, when I go back to that time, and the reason I painted that picture on my wall at the 30-year mark, I've said many times that as much as people would the normal response is to say, "Oh, Dan was great," and I think Dan's a fallible human being, just like everybody else. I don't deify people, so I see Dan as the man that he is. I don't put him on a pedestal. Great instructor at the time when I started with him. He was only in his late 40s, early 50s, so he was just younger than I am now. So great martial artist. It really though wasn't Dan. It was this amazing gathering of people who had been inspired by Bruce Lee, had been inspired by even the Kung Fu television series. All these people who had come from all over the world, and they were all in that room with me, and we were all so fired up and so inspired and so dedicated. And I already had been training for 20 years when I showed up at the Innocanto Academy. So, and a lot of the guys who came in were in the same boat. So we had all these really intensely interested martial artists. And at that particular time, every other day, some new instructor would come through the door. Chai would show up. I remember when Chai first came. I remember when Paul Dutoit showed up. I remember all these. It was a really different time. It was just a magnetic energy in the school. It was certainly Dan was the catalyst, but it was the spirit of it was really the collective spirit of all involved. So it was a really great time. I really consider it a golden time at the school.
These guys had nothing but good words to say about you.
Oh, they're great. You know, it's interesting because time is such a thief. You know, this is when we were changing. You know, I mean, look at us now. This picture's not that long ago, so maybe a year or so before the pandemic. But we were just, I mean, we're close to the same age. We were just kids when we met. We were just those kids in that room, full of spirit and full of fire. Right. And it was such a great time. And as much as guys aren't supposed to say this, I love both these guys. They were super important on my path, and I just have the highest respect for both of them. I think they're great. Yeah. Have you ever spent any time training with Cass?
Yeah.
Cass is terrific. Cass is there is no other Cass. Cass is uniquely Cass.
Right.
Certainly, I would say the same thing about Chris Kent, but Cass is just, he was carved by a guy who instantly dropped dead after the carving. there's just no copy for Cass.
Right.
I really like Cass a lot, and I think he's wonderful. I think he's a great guy.
Okay, I'll tell you something. When I did my podcast on Wednesday,
mm-hmm.
yesterday he called. He goes, you know, seems to me that what you talked about in the podcast was kind of similar to our conversation earlier. I go, yes, Cass, I take notes when you call me.
Yes, like I said, that's Cass. Yeah, he's great.
Yeah.
He's not exactly the same as other people. Just a little. He's always been that way, by the way. He's always been slightly. It's like he's slightly out of phase, if you understand what I mean by that.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
He's great. Yeah.
I mean, I met him the day I met Innocanto.
Yeah.
You know. And I spoke to him yesterday.
Yeah.
Right.
And people don't. Again, that was a special time in the school, and one of my students who drives up from San Diego, he's been around Innocanto since the early '80s, like yourself.
Right.
And it's something he said to me a couple of years ago. Actually, it was very interesting. He said, thousands of people have kind of gone through the sifter of the Innocanto Academy. So many people have trained there, and he said, and yet there's only a really small handful of people who actually kind of became their own voice and their own perspective and their own point of view, and he was saying that to me as a compliment to me. But he then said there was Cass, there was Chris.
Yeah.
I think you probably know Blaze Loon.
Yep.
Obviously Paul Bunak, Jeff Chun. It was a great little. And again, we didn't know it at the time. We were just a bunch of kids
right.
doing martial arts,
Right.
but the passion was so strong back then, and I think it still is a strong burning coal in all of those men. I still think of them all as the same age as they were when we were there training. And I know they're older, but
Yeah.
I keep that spirit alive. So
What's funny is that I just got a hold of the first Chai seminar from 1985.
I think I saw the picture.
Yeah.
You posted a pic. Yeah, that was
Yeah,
pretty
I
cool.
just got a hold of this video of that, and it's almost like it was yesterday.
Yeah, feels like yesterday.
Yeah,
I still, as much as Chai is great, his English is a lot better now than it used to be. And I still occasionally imitate him the way he used to talk. The students will fall on the floor and laugh. And I said it was great. You could barely understand him, but it was magical to train with him. So
yeah. So, like I said, if we were to go through all of the pictures that I downloaded from your website, we would be here all night.
Yeah.
And I don't want to do that to you. But teaching.
Mm-hmm.
And teaching. So the people who come to you, are they all in search of ultimately the same thing, or different things?
Good question. I oftentimes say that when somebody comes to me or any teacher, but we're talking about me right now, as much as something might have sparked an interest, whether it was Bruce Lee, if they're from that generation, or whether it's mixed martial arts or UFC, whatever it has inspired that. Ultimately, everybody comes because of fear. I think there's a core of fear about violence, and certainly unless you're blind and not watching the news, you know that there's violence out there, and it escalates and changes all the time. And especially males have this yoke put on them from a young age that they should be able to defend their families and defend themselves. And that's an unrealistic thing to have planted on your shoulders, because our society doesn't really engender that kind of a mindset in how to defend yourself. So you're sort of stuck with this empty holster, essentially, that you're supposed to have a weapon in, but you don't have anything. And I think that kernel of fear is always present. And then there's something else that brings them, because I don't think that they would come from the fear. That would be too sort of personally confronting. What I try to touch on is that this art was born of that, was born of a kind of violence that thankfully we don't normally have to deal with. You're talking about jungle warfare, melee combat in the dark of the moon in the jungles. Right. That's something that you and I thankfully don't have to deal with.
Right.
But I've touched hands with people who did that. And
right.
it's a different world, and the mindset to survive and thrive in a situation like that is what I think anybody wants. And certainly I've said it 100 times to my students that when there's women in the class, the women are 10 times more likely to be attacked than any of the men. So for us to think of martial arts as a male pursuit and that women are just sort of a thing that gets in our way, that's so awful. If nothing else, we should think of ourselves as a small tribe, and we should make it our job to make certain that the women in our tribe are lethal. That if they get into trouble, we'll get to hear the story of how horribly they destroyed the person who tried to assault them, rather than we get to go to their funeral. So I take all of that stuff very seriously, but I think ultimately, aside from the kind of ugliness, that fear that is the foundation, I think there's a higher level too. And I don't think I would have done martial arts had it not had that higher calling in it. I've said it many times that when somebody comes to my school, I think they aspire to be a better version of themselves. And part of their reasoning for walking through the door is essentially, without saying so, to ask me to put them to that task, to be there and essentially demand that higher effort from them, and to be a better person, to be a faithful husband, to be a good friend, to be a caring, doting father, whatever it might be. And when they're here and they hear us talk, I'm constantly talking about honor and integrity and chivalry and being a good person. I think it makes people, it's what people stay for. It's why I have students who've been with me for 20, 25 years. So, because there's something more to it. If martial arts was just MMA, I'm going to get in the ring and beat the crap out of another guy who didn't really do anything wrong to me, but I'm going to do so for fame and fortune. To me, that's the antithesis of martial arts. Mm-hmm. So, first of all, just throw a knife in the ring and watch real martial arts come into play. So, one knife.
Right. Yeah.
Because the fight for the knife will be the first fight, and then once the knife is had, now you'll see the real fight.
Yeah.
So changes everything.
Listen, I'm not blowing smoke. This has been extremely valuable to me just to get the opportunity to talk with you.
I'd love to do it again.
Good. I was going to ask you to promise that.
Beat you to it. Preemptive. There you go.
Okay. And I'll set it up. We'll go through the influence, the people of influence. We'll do that photo thing and talk some more about taking people from walking through the door to their next level of accomplishment.
Sure. I also, since my setup is here in my school, I'm always happy to make certain the student is available and happy to show you things that we talk about. So I'm happy to go through aspects of the art if that's of interest. So
hey man, you might start a trend. Yeah, you might start a trend. All right, Mark Mikita, it's been a pleasure, man.
Thank you so much. I've enjoyed it very much.
Take care.
All right.
That was episode number 176 of the Jeet Kune Do Dialogues. Please like, share, comment, ask questions. I will ask Mark Mikita to take a look at the questions and we'll review everything. Follow me on Twitter at Dwight Woods and on Instagram at Dwight D. Woods. Next Friday, episode 177, we'll do a 2-on-1 with Tim Becker. I like Bescherer, right? And Andy Wilson. So Tim's out of the Innocanto Academy and Andy's out of MKG Seattle. We've been talking a lot offline, and they're two really, really smart guys, and I think you'll enjoy what they have to say about the, let's say, the current state of Jeet Kune Do, right? So that'll be next Friday at 6 p.m. usual time. So hopefully I'll see some of you then. Hopefully I'll see some of you next Wednesday when we do the I Love Jeet Kune Do broadcast as well. All right, until then, this is Dwight Woods, the Jeet Kune Do Rebel, signing off. You guys enjoy your weekend. Have a great time. Stay safe. Talk soon. Take care.
I'm gonna take my right hand away for a second, so leave everything right where it is. You see how there's space right here? You want to take all that space away. So again, if you use too much force, you're gonna elicit a countering response. What I want you to do is take my weapon and shove it into that space. Yes. Now I can't do anything. Now if you just push straight down, I have to let go. Okay? So now realize, again, what you're doing is correct. This is not wrong. But there's always a choice that I have because of what you choose to do. So as you push down.
And as I did that, I noticed that in order for it to slip, I had to raise my stick a little bit.
Absolutely, a little subtle adjustment. And that's going to be different for each person because of their flexibility. Okay, so as you push down, realize that as you do, freeze everything right where it is. Look at how close I am. My hand is right here, and your hand is right here. My hand is 3 inches away from your hand. So if I'm here, I can immediately take my weapon back, and now you have a problem. You have to get back to where you can defend against this. Okay, I also have the same problem, by the way. You can attack me, But if you're not in attack mode, most people who do quintada, they unconsciously shift into defensive mode. So they stop attacking and they just start trying to solve problems. But you have to stay offensive all the time. Everything is attack. Everything I do to begin any action is to get you to defend yourself. That's how I'm doing it, by attacking you. It's all offensive, okay? So obviously we have to be safe, so we can't go too fast past your natural ability to keep me safe, and vice versa. So every time you do anything, go ahead. I'm looking for an offensive advantage. How can I get back to attacking you? You see what I mean? So here, when I take this out, I want to attack. Here, I want to attack. Everything is integrated into that. My disarms are an integral part of my effort to attack you, not to disarm you. Because if I apply this and I succeed, okay, I have your sticks, can you still punch me? Can you still kick me? Yeah, so I have to keep attacking. It's not about disarming, okay? What do I have? Line, see it? So you gotta get that stick out. So wait, extend your wrist. I'm sorry, extend your elbow. Toward me, extend. No, not out. Toward me. That's it. Get that stick out of there. So if you have me,
wow. Yeah.
you have me, grab my stick. This is the problem. Extend your arm. See how I got out? So I just move my body away from this and then I can counter damage you. Okay, so grab your stick out. So if I have you, and I'm here, this is what I have. Yes! And you're out, now grab my hand, and you have this arm right there. You're already there, that's it. You're already there. One more time. One more time. So I have you here, that's the lock. So get out and disarm. Yes! Just like that. Feel it? That's what you want. So keep going. You have the same disarm. No, where's your hand? Yes, you have the same disarm, so I have to perceive that to counter it, okay? So again, hit, up. That's right there, that's right there. Yes, it's right there, that's it. So again, it's not that you don't know the techniques, it's that you're not awake to see them. It's just being awake. That's it. Hop, hop, hop. That's it. See this over there? Hop, hop, hop. What do you do to counter it? No. Do the disarm me. When you grab, as you put pressure, I turn my elbow. Go. Turn my elbow, turn. Okay, so do it again. Watch. As you push, I turn. Feel that? Mm-hmm. So as I have you need an angle on the stick. If your arm and the stick are the same line, that's not going to work. So as I push, let your elbow go out. There, you have nothing. See? That's what you do. Now from there, what do you have? You have a snake? Yes, you have a snake. Grab your stick. Push down. Boom. Okay? So again. Stick it backwards. That's it. Right there. Left turn. So you see how you grab the middle of my stick? Go back a little bit. Let's go back in time. You grab the middle of my stick. Not wrong, but you need to know the vulnerability. See the situation I can trap. And then I can trap. So again, what you're doing isn't wrong, but if you're not awake to what it will give me, that's where the error is occurring. Yeah, that's good. You got that. That's good. That's it. Hop, disarm again. You give me what kind of disarm? Left turn disarm, yeah. Good, there's disarm right there. What do I have if you let go of that stick? Block. Okay, so you don't want that. That's it. So you want to put your stick over my stick. Over it. Bring your pointer. Yes! Now push down. Now you have me. See the vulnerability. So I'd have to either take the stick out or grab my stick again. Go hit me, I bring the stick up. And then I can take everything out. You can the stick. Okay, so from there, this one. That's it. Go. Good. Oh, my gosh. This one right there. Left turn this arm again, you feel it?
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, look at the danger, you put yourself in 2 hands on one, keep going. Keep doing what you're doing. See, go on. Because my hand was right there, so as soon as you freed me up, you're going to give me that lock. So you need to know that. So if you have the same, grab my stick. What you were doing is you were reaching here. So you see how I'm giving you a lock. No, don't pull your weapon, doesn't help you. Actually, you had this. So as I go to do this, just grab my wrist. And don't you have a lock? You see it? So it isn't wrong, it's that you're not awake. So let's switch it. Okay, like this. So watch how I'm going to counter. So as I come here like this and you go to do that same technique, you know with this one?
Yes.
Okay, so if I'm aware of how you're doing it, again you're here, as I reach here, you bring that stick up, I shove my elbow down, so I can twist, and I have the weapon back. Make sense?
Yes.
There you go. Hook. So I'm closing you out with my elbow. So that's why I stepped in. Because now I can use my own stick to look all the way to the mistake. I don't want to do that. So when you do that, it's going to free the weapon, you're going to have a hard time. So you need to know that. So this might be a place where a two-handed technique would work. Yes, because you can keep that pinched. That's the way. So now I'd have to release. You have to know that I'm there. And you have to know that the targets are there too. Know that I'm going to, in other words, when I'm here, you have to know. You have to move the target. That way I can't hit it. If it's there, I'm going to hit it. Again, see, I move the target. Okay, so when you have my hand, you can grab my hand if you want. That's what you have. So from here, I still have a disarm. Because I'm here, there's a disarm. Feel it?
Yes.
You actually have the same disarm. Just bring your point underneath. Here, you have the same disarm. Yes, just like that. So if you do the same action, I know you're there, so if I change the position, you see how I took now I have it. Okay? So it's just about who controls the center line and who controls the full point. Oh, left turn. Same thing is coming up. That's normal. Pattern's going to arise. Oh, this one again. What was the mistake?
I lifted my elbow.
You lifted your hand.
Oh.
Yeah, that's a mistake. That's it. Oh, did it again. Don't lift that hand. Don't beat up on yourself.
No,
Don't beat up on yourself. So. Oh, you did it again. Don't lift that hand.
I felt the pressure
Yeah.
on your hand, and I thought
Well, and I'm going to do that. I'm intentionally going to start pushing because everybody resists. And you push up on my hand, as soon as you do, you'll get disarmed.
Yeah.
Okay, so everybody resists. It's natural. Got to block this. You can't ignore these shots. What do you have? Take it right away. Take it right away. If I give it to you, take it. Because if you don't, I'm going to immediately counter you. So if you take your time, I'm going to get on you. Okay? So you have to take those opportunities as soon as they come. What did I do? What was different? It was what kind of a disarm?
It wasn't mine.
Yes, it was. What was different about it? Hand position, careful. What was different about it? I used my arm instead of my stick. My whole arm was inside. Yeah, I did that one. Okay? So that's what I mean. It's not that you don't know the techniques, it's that in the midst of the flow, you're not aware. It's that you've lost your awakeness. Okay? So you gotta stay constantly present, constantly awake. How can you get out of this without using your other hand? Well, remember earlier you said that the experiment, but you didn't really experiment? Because you just did that. You tried something, but you didn't really try. Because if you, let's switch the situation. So you have this, grab my hand, palm down. Here's the way out, right there. Then I can lock you like this one. So watch it again. I went, that's it. I went over to the center line. I push straight down as if I'm sheathing my weapon. Okay, so again, so straight down, then I hit right here, and because of your foot position, it's hard for you to counter this. If your feet were reversed, it would be hard for me to do this, okay, because based on your hip position. When you grab right, go ahead and do that. So I counter this. Then I have a lock, then I have a strike, because you turned your attention to my hand and forgot that your body is still here. So you have to